Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Hey Megan, does this hold up? Or did I just ruin my childhood?
Hey Steve, my name's Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And today we have a special bonus episode.
Bonus! Labor Day.
Labor Day. So we thought a lot about what we should pick for Labor Day, and we decided that we wanted a classic I hate work movie. So that is Office Space.
1999. It's just at the very tip end of our 80s and 90s.
Yeah, we're pushing it a little bit.
But that's okay. It's still 90s technically.
That is very true. It's still in the 90s, and it's still before I graduated college. So I guess it still counts as kind of my childhood. So you can find Office Space on Freevee. That is the Amazon Prime station that is ad supported, but it's uncut.
Right.
So it's not like the version that we got on Comedy Central that we'll talk about.
Right.
Yeah. It's uncut version, but it does have ads, but you can see it for free or you can rent it there.
Okay, so that brings us into my favorite segment, the non-sponsored snack time. Today's non-sponsored snack is cotton candy.
Yes.
The old-fashioned, fair summer food.
And what does that have to do with Office Space?
Well, it's the end of summer.
It's the end of summer, and cotton candy, so to be fair, right now we have the kind that comes in a plastic tin.
Yes, and Megan got fancy, and she got blueberry jam cotton candy and maple bacon cotton candy.
Yeah, and so here's the reason, just to be honest. I did have the opportunity to get us some real cotton candy.
Yeah.
The problem with real cotton candy is that it's spun sugar. So if it gets a little bit of moisture in there, it's like ruined. So I didn't want to get us real and then I didn't know when we would be able to record. But yeah, these are kind of like for our show, a grown up version of what we grew up with, like at the fair or the circus or whatever. Also, I thought they would go together like breakfast. Now, I'm going to tell you, you want to try the maple bacon while I try the blueberry?
Yeah.
We can swap. The blueberry smells like blueberry muffin, strawberry shortcake doll.
Yeah.
Like, it is definitely a distinctly, like, fakey blueberry flavor.
And the maple bacon tastes pretty much like maple bacon.
It smells like it.
Yeah. It smells like maple bacon or even maple sausage links.
Mmm.
It smells a lot like that.
These are made by Chocolate Storybook.
That's the brand name?
That's a brand.
And where did you pick this up, Megan?
Oh, I picked it up in Corning, New York. If you've seen the show Blown Away, that is the glass blowing competition show. Takes place in Corning. Corning sponsors that show, and they have a glass museum, which is amazing. Some of it's historical and some of it's pieces of art. They have a glass blowing factory there, and they also have glass blowing classes. And then they have kind of a cute little town, and this does taste like breakfast when you put them together.
Yeah.
It's like blueberry pancakes and maple bacon sausage.
Blueberry, I like the blueberry flavor a lot, too. The blueberry is strong. It's not overpowering, but it's strong enough. And it does taste, I guess, like, it does remind me of jam.
Mm.
You know, or like blueberry syrup.
Mm-hmm.
It tastes a little bit like that, too. Just has that strong blueberry flavor.
I could eat both of these.
Yeah.
I would go into a diabetic coma, but I could house them down in about 5-10 minutes.
This is interesting because it's kind of gourmet cotton candy.
I know.
So that's a bonus because I do like the maple bacon flavor. I like the blueberry flavor a lot. And that's good because I normally don't like cotton candy.
This is cotton candy for hipsters.
Yeah.
Or for adults. You don't like regular cotton candy?
No, and this is the problem.
What?
And even with this a little bit.
No.
The texture is a lot like eating insulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
you say
dream.
that like it's a good thing. It's not.
Listen, when I was 5,
Or like eating cotton balls.
My parents re-insulated like our garage, and they had all the pink fluffy insulation. And I was like, oh, and my mom had to grab.
This explains a lot.
This is one of my early memories. My mom had to grab me to hold me because I was like about to run and jump onto this what I thought was like a fluffy pink cloud of Pink Panther insulation. I love regular cotton candy.
Really?
Yeah, I first had it, again, another really early memory. Barnum and Bailey and the Ringling Brothers Circus.
Yep.
Came through when I was probably like maybe 4. And I
With
think
King Tusk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember they had that like sheep or goat that they put a horn on and they were calling it like a unicorn? And I know that the circus has been canceled because they were really cruel to the animals. I get it. But when you're a little kid and you go to the circus, especially back then, it's like amazing.
It's still amazing. I'd go to the circus today.
It's just the colors and the lights and everything. Anyway, that's the first time I had cotton candy, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
and how can I have this every day?
It's like a zoo, but with showmanship.
I mean, a little bit, but it's also like, it's acrobatics.
And clowns.
There's clowns, there's acrobats, there's animals, there's magicians, there's a lot going. I mean, there's a reason they call it 3-ring or 5-ring. Yeah. Right?
There's cotton candy if you're one of those people that likes it.
So.
Well, we could do circus talk all day.
I know.
Let's get to the rating. What do you rate cotton candy?
Oh, this is easily, I almost gave it a 10. Oh, we have to do out of staplers today, obviously.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely out of staplers.
Okay.
Office Space.
So, if you haven't been with us before, sorry for the, I'm gonna stop eating this. It's so good. It's so, so good. 1 out of 5 staplers for the snack, and 1 out of 10 staplers for the show. This is easily 5 staplers.
Okay.
Easily.
So, normally I would give cotton candy a 2.
What?
Megan, I've talked about this because
I know
it's
the
insulation.
texture. I get the texture, but it melts in your mouth. It's so sugary and delicious. Usually it just tastes like cherry or like blue raspberry. It's so good. How can you not like cotton candy?
No. So I would give it a 2, but because of the unique flavors of the maple bacon and the blueberry jam, I'm going to push it up to a 3.
That's it? You're giving this a 3?
3 staplers for cotton candy.
I feel like I don't know who I married. That's what I feel like right now. I feel like I've been betrayed and bamboozled. So.
Yeah! 4 staplers out of 5.
Out of 5. I almost said
Not out of 4. You don't get to boost it up. It's still, my vote counts.
That's pretty good though, 4 out of 5. If you like cotton candy, I guarantee you will love this. Chocolate Storybook. They are not an official sponsor. This is an unsponsored snack.
But we're open to it. Chocolate Storybook. We'll tag you.
Listen.
And we're open to any sponsorship.
I would 100%. And I know also they had like 20 more flavors I could have picked from. I picked these 2 because I thought they'd go well together, and I know you like bacon flavor.
They actually had a pickle flavor.
Yeah, I wasn't about to.
That I saw.
I can't deal with that.
I mean, it was just really interesting, the amount of flavors.
Anyway, let's get into Office Space, the movie. Can you give us a summary?
Yeah, so Office Space is about this guy, Peter, who is stuck in kind of a white-collar computer tech job that's very oppressive. It's very cubicle, what we think of when we think of being like in an office hell, basically, right?
Yeah.
Where you're basically almost a number, you're just stuck with a bunch of things. There's a lot of weird rules, a lot of extra supervision, things like that. And so he is hypnotized to try to de-stress him, but the hypnotist dies before releasing him from his like de-stressed, no worries kind of trance that he's in. Mm-hmm. And so he spends the rest of the movie basically not caring anymore. So he goes through saying and doing things that most of us that have worked in this type of environment wanted to, but never got the chance.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the allure. And it actually leads to a number of good things. He ends up getting promoted. He ends up meeting a girl, but also ends up in a kind of bad situation as well.
Yeah.
He ends up almost in a white collar criminal situation.
Yeah.
And then at the end, of course, I think he learns a bit of a lesson by the end. And we see, first off that you do have to do responsibilities, but also you can kind of choose what ones are best for you. So, it's got a great cast. It was in 1999, as I said before. And it's by Mike Judge. Which I'm sure you're going to talk about when we get to the history.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. I think that's a great overview for people who have never seen it. First, I want to say a little something about Labor Day.
Okay.
So, the first Labor Day celebration was September 5th, 1882 in New York City. 10,000 citizens marched for labor rights down the streets of Manhattan.
Okay.
Our other possible pick for today was Newsies, but Steve didn't want to watch a bunch of boys singing songs and dancing. It would have been closer to that time, but it's around that time period, right? There's this book called Erewhon, which is like like backwards almost for nowhere. Mm-hmm. And it's a utopian novel, and the protagonist like taken forward in time, and he keeps asking like, now what happened with the unionists, because it was that big of a problem at that time, because the average American worked 12 hours a day 6 days a week. And so
we complain now about a 40-hour work week.
I know, and
people
they had
want a 72-hour work week.
Yeah, and people want a 4-day work week.
Yeah.
But we also, that's the thing though, I will say, Steve, that the promise of technology was that it would ease burdens. Like, if you look in the 1950s, like, the housewife doesn't have to scrub the floors, or, she has a plug-in vacuum, and she has a newfangled food processor, and she has a better sewing machine, right? So all of those were supposed to be labor-saving devices. And I think that we're kind of seeing that they can be, especially with computer technology, and that maybe there isn't a need for us to do quite, work smarter, not harder. I'm not arguing totally for that. I'm just saying that that's one of the arguments. Right. So the I can't do it. The Adamson Act was passed on September 3rd, 1916, and that kind of helped to establish the modern 8-hour workday.
Okay.
And the rest of the article talks about whether or not we can wear white, and whether it's the official end of the hot dog season, and how it is dangerous to drive, because a lot of people drink on Labor Day because it's the end of the summer.
Right. It basically just became, in modern days, it just became kind of the end of the summer holiday. And it is kind of it does fit, because it's sort of like everyone's taking their vacations for the summer. It's kind of back to work, back to school. And it's a celebration still, I think, of careers and working, and the fact that we have to work and things of that nature. The greatest celebration of Labor Day in history was September 5th, 1977, when I was born.
That's true. Were you born on Labor Day?
I was born on Labor Day.
So,
and it's interesting because it moves around. It's only happened, like this year, it's actually on my birthday as well.
Yeah.
But it's only happened like maybe 4 times in my lifetime. The year I was born, it was Labor Day. And as you just mentioned, the first Labor Day ever was on the 5th.
Yeah. So your mother
was in labor.
On Labor
Day. Yes.
I like puns so much. Yeah, so let's get into the movie, which celebrates not, it doesn't celebrate working at all. It's the opposite. It bemoans labor, I guess. Yes. I'll put it that way. So a little bit of history. I completely forgot about this until I looked up the movie. I totally forgot that this was based initially on a cartoon series. Mm-hmm. There were a series of shorts, and we did watch one. You can see those on YouTube. I'll post them on Facebook. I haven't had time, and I apologize to our listeners. I've been extremely busy with my real job besides this one, and I haven't had time really to do the blog. But I'll post it on Facebook, and a lot of people have been messaging us on there as well, which is fun. So, yeah, the Milton cartoon series was a series of shorts, and it first showed on Liquid Television on MTV, which also was a show that I forgot about until I did research for this particular episode. And then It also showed on like a late night show. I think also on MTV.
Okay.
One that I didn't really remember. And then also, he moved them over to SNL. And he was credited as a writer on SNL, and I don't know if that's the only thing that he did for them or if he wrote other sketches.
Okay.
I didn't get that deep into it. But basically, Mike Judge did the voices in that of both Milton, the beleaguered employee, and the boss with like the slicked back hair and the suspenders. And it was based actually on somebody that he knew. So he worked an office job for a little bit of time. And this is a person who kept threatening to quit or do something if they moved his desk one more time. And so that's kind of how it sparked things. And then he was approached apparently to do this as a movie, and he did not want to do it. And instead put his efforts into Beavis and Butthead. A show that I don't know that we can do for this podcast. I don't know if I can take it. Then Beavis and Butthead really took off for MTV. And we talked last time or the time before about how Nickelodeon.
Yep, for Double Dare.
No, it wasn't. They did do Double Dare, but it was Salute Your Shorts.
Oh, okay.
They didn't have money, remember, for shows like that because they were putting money into Beavis and Butthead.
Yes.
Because they're connected to MTV. And so, at any rate, it took off. It became very popular. He kind of did what I call the circuit. Like, he did all the late night talk shows and all of that. And then he did Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Right, the movie.
Listen, I worked in the movie theater for this movie. It was horrific. I have never seen an opening. We used to do midnight screenings, right? And technically, because I was 16, or 17, I was supposed to go home. But it was a Friday, and my parents were like, "Oh, you can stay." And my friend and I watched a different movie at midnight because that theater was full. Mm-hmm. We went in to help clean up. There was beer everywhere.
Oh, wow.
There was like beer and vomit, and it was like we legitimately had to call in. Like our manager was like, "Just go home." And then the next day he called in extra people from other area theaters that the one guy owned a bunch of them. He was like, "We're going to need you to help clean up." It was like like 20 people had to clean the theater. It was horrible. So anyway, once he did that movie, then he had some clout because it did pretty well. So that's when he came back to the idea of doing Office Space. And he had also by that time started on King of the Hill, which was kind of his next project. So he does Office Space, and one of the big things, I guess, while they were making it is that the studio executives wanted it like a Hollywood version of an Office. Right. So he had to keep saying, like, "No, we're not doing it on Wall Street, and we're like New York City will be in the background. Yeah. And we're not doing it like there's this movie Brazil that's like kind of a Baz Luhrmann fantasy version." He's like, "We're not doing that." He's like, "This has got to be like dull, like my Office experience was."
Yeah, he kept having input on the production, and he kept like adding to the set, and because he said he wanted the Office to be oppressive. Like he wanted it to feel that way, right?
Yes. And also that so they have this thing in movies and TV shows sometimes, but usually movies, where they call it the dailies. So execs get to see like what was filmed that day. Right? And they kept coming to them and they were like, more energy. And Mike Judge was like, "No." They didn't want like pep, because you don't have peppiness in an office cubicle, right? He also said that he would have rewritten the whole last third act.
Okay.
Which I find really interesting. And I couldn't find more details than the couple articles where he had expressed that. He was like, what he said was, "It's obvious the way it should end. And he wishes that he had done that." And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means like they all keep working.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. There is a character who is the neighbor who we'll get into. And that was based on somebody he knew as well. And I don't want to talk about that now until we kind of get into that character.
Sure.
But, and then my last thing is, this was my favorite piece of research is from Open Culture, the online magazine. And in their film history section, they have an article called Why 1999 Was the Year of Dystopian Office Movies. Because The Matrix, Fight Club, American Beauty, Office Space, and Being John Malkovich.
Wow.
All feature horrific, dull
white collar offices. Yeah.
So here's what they said. This is a quote. Unlike monster movies showing Cold War anxieties and 21st century horror movies conveying fears of acts of terror, the films of 1999 were not about surviving the present because the present was actually going well. They were about being tired of that stable present and looking for a radically different future.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting that all of those movies, what they said, all those movies have in common is that you have people in very, and they even, here it's not stable because there's layoffs or possible layoffs, but you have people in pretty steady careers. And it's the fear of the mundane.
Yeah.
That, I think when you look at like a different horror movie, you're concerned about like safety or survival. And here you're concerned more about like self-actualization. Yeah. How can I be creative if I'm in a cubicle?
The pressures of the middle class, right? It's the pressures of having a career and all the other stuff that comes with that, right? And it's interesting that that's the 90s, late 90s kind of feel with, especially the 99 movies, because I feel like this movie is it's humorous and it's kind of lighthearted showing that. Yeah. But it's accomplishing almost the same thing as the much darker story with Michael Douglas and Falling Down.
Yes. And
that's like a serious dark take, but same point really.
Yeah. And that's a movie that, if we ever revisit, as a young teenager, I think maybe 14, 15, I thought that it was funny. I enjoyed the dark humor. As an adult, especially going through what we've gone through in this country, I don't think I would find it funny at all. And I think also, you know, what he's facing, and all of that. I don't want to bring down the podcast. But yeah, you're right that here it's the same subject matter treated very differently. And we did have at this point in time, things like, you know, there was a term that we never use anymore, and that is going postal.
Yeah, yeah.
And they make fun of that on Seinfeld as well. Mm-hmm. And I also think is interesting because you and I have kind of had jobs like this before, sort of, but we made some pretty deliberate decisions, like, to not have this kind of a job.
Yeah, well, also, you know, work culture has become a little bit more casual and a little bit more worker-friendly.
Well, I think for us, but if you think about, I won't say this person's name, but we have a relative who, when they went to remote for COVID, there's software on their computer that watches their keystrokes.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
And then they're told, you know, this is why I know that this kind of blew up a little bit ago because of the person who was representing the group, but there's an anti-work group on Reddit, and it isn't, I don't want to work. It's just, I don't want to work like this.
Right.
Where you put in for paid time off. I had somebody that I knew that put in for paid time off. They had not had a vacation in 3 years, and they were told no because they were kind of holding everything together during COVID. And they were like, look, I'm burned out. And they were told no, so they left. You know, I think that a lot of people, I think you and I are very fortunate, but also, to be fair, we have worked our way up in our careers as well.
Right.
But there are a lot of people where they are monitored for how long they're in the bathroom. They are, told that they can't have time off. And this movie isn't just the office, it's also the restaurant as well.
Yeah, it does take place in a few different
And I don't know that restaurants have changed that much with
wait staff.
Hey, you have to come in today even though it's your day off and you're in a different state. Or people being told, you should have asked for that time off ahead of time for, a funeral.
Yeah.
And then, and to be honest, those are the types of things that labor unions were formed initially. I'm not saying now, but initially that's what they were formed to try to get better circumstances for the workers. That's what Labor Day is kind of about. So at any rate, we'll come back and we will talk about our memories of this movie or lack thereof. And hopefully we have some because it was only $19.99. And then we'll get into our full review and recap. This podcast is supported by its creators.
And listeners like you.
Help keep our show ad-free by visiting our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com.
There you can find links to our social media.
And this very podcast you're currently listening to.
Both Megan and I are authors, and you can find links to our books on our About page.
And on our Watch With Us page, you can find videos and links for all the shows and movies we discuss on the podcast.
And more importantly, links to buy the nostalgic snacks we review as well.
We also post bonus content about once a month.
So subscribe, and follow.
For a small independent podcast like ours, it really does make a difference. Thanks. All right, and we're back. My name's Megan.
I'm Steve.
So let's get into it. What are some of your memories of Office Space?
Well, I don't recall watching this in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw it probably on DVD. VHS or DVD release.
Mm-hmm.
When it right after or when it was released to DVD and VHS, it's probably when I saw it the first time. And then of course Comedy Central did runs of this movie. Right.
Yeah.
And so I've seen it a lot on Comedy Central and things of that nature. But yeah, it's one of those things. I may have rented it once, even streaming, just to see it again, in its entirety without the commercial cuts and things like that. So yeah, I remember being hilarious. I remember my brother, Kevin, and I, laughing and thinking it's a funny movie.
Yeah, I think the Comedy Central thing is interesting because this is not exactly early days of cable, but early days of really 24-hour programming becoming a thing. After the O.J. Simpson trial in particular, which would have been just a couple years before this, that you have CNN 24 hours, and then all of these new networks started popping up. Back when we were little, cable was like HBO.
Right.
Right. So things like the USA Network and Comedy Central, they had to find programming.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a movie that I don't want to step too much on reception, but it didn't, from what I recall, it was I don't even remember it being in the theater.
Right.
And I did not see it in the theater for sure. I've never seen the uncut version until we did it for this podcast.
Oh, look at that. We did that together.
I've only seen it on Comedy Central, edited, right? And I think you're right that you'd be flipping around. Comedy Central, around this time also got South Park, which was huge at that point. And we used to watch that in my sorority.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the only things for us that was appointment TV. We'd all get together in the common area of the dorm.
96, 97. I remember watching it in college.
So this was a couple years after that, but it was still a big thing. And I believe that it was about this time that then I don't think it was probably in theaters for very long. It got picked up by Comedy Central. So it would be on in the common area of our dorm, and you'd walk past and you'd be like, oh, and then eventually you'd watch bits and pieces of it. And then because they'd play it, like you said, over and over, then you'd see the whole thing.
Right.
So I know now the movie has many memes have been made out of it, right? And there's a lot of clips that have become GIFs. But I think this was like a meme before it was like memed, right? Because people would, like, there are guys who just, like, their sense of humor is just quoting movies.
Yeah.
And this is one of those movies. You know, like, you would say to somebody, oh, I'll have to, I don't know, I'm kind of tired today. And they'd be like, oh, looks like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
Right.
You know, like lines like that. Yeah, I'm going to need that right now, and kind of doing like a Lumberg impression and things like that. So yeah, I have pretty fond memories of it, and just, that early, love for Comedy Central. So anyway, so let's get into it.
All right, so the full review piece. Well, the first thing we do is Office Space opens is we have kind of the setup, right?
Yeah.
Where we get to see Peter, we meet some of the surrounding characters, and what his life is like to start with.
Yeah. Peter, Samir, and Michael are like the triad of the center of the film.
Yes.
I really like how they introduce these characters in a traffic jam, because you get to see all of their very distinct personalities.
Yeah.
Right? First of all, we open with Mambo number 5.
Yeah.
It is such a classic 90s song. I love it. Rob Livingston is the guy who keeps trying to switch lanes and can't.
Oh yeah, Ron Livingston. And Ron Livingston's a great choice for Peter.
Yeah.
As the main character.
Why do you think that?
Because I think he just brings something, it's interesting because initially Mike Judge was kind of being pressured to look at Ben Affleck and Matt Damon for this movie.
Interesting.
Because Good Will Hunting had just been big.
I was just going to say this after Good Will Hunting.
They weren't sure if they could get them because they didn't have a big budget. But the studio was like, get the biggest names you can to help promote it. And he wasn't really sold on it. And while he was trying to deal with that, Ron Livingston's agent called him and said, hey, can he read for it? And so he read with the casting agent, and she really liked him. And then Mike Judge saw the tape and was like, yeah, and he basically told the studio, yeah, I want this guy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because Ron Livingston is this kind of, to me, he's a middle actor where he's not exactly a character actor, but he's not exactly classic Hollywood leading man. He's attractive looking, but he doesn't have like the Hollywood glam.
He's everyday man.
Yeah.
And he fits in this role because he plays a great straight man in comedy.
Yes, that's true.
Right. All the comedy's happening around him or through his actions, but he's very, it's funny because you mentioned that this is a super quotable movie.
Yeah.
But very few of the quotes come from him.
No, that's true. He's kind of the center of it, and he's kind of meant to represent how we would feel if we were in this situation, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Then we have my favorite, there are 2 bits here that are hilarious. The first is that as he's switching lanes, there's this old guy with a walker.
Yes.
And he's moving
faster than him.
The second, then we cut to Samir, who is just filled with fury and just slamming on his steering wheel. But then we come to Michael Bolton. And I never picked this up the first time. I don't know if it's because the edits that I saw, or just that now we're a little more woke in our generation, or in our time. But I love that this is a very stereotypically white nerd playing
computer programmer,
playing hardcore gangster rap in his car. But what is really the hilarious joke is that when an actual African-American person comes by, he locks the doors, turns his music down, and slumps down in his seat to hide.
Right.
So
he's not gangster at all. But then as soon as the car drives by, he turns it back up and starts acting.
But also that it's this thing of like, I think this was pretty typical in the 90s of like, you're appropriating black culture, but then you're afraid of black. Like, it's so racist. But it's a really good nod to how the character actually is.
And Michael Bolton is played by David Herman, and he was the first person ever cast for the whole movie.
Oh, really? That's
Mike
interesting.
Judge knew him, and he was like, I want David Herman to play Michael Bolton.
fascinating.
David Herman at the time was on Mad TV, which he didn't want to be on anymore. He wanted to get out of. And Mike Judge had had him do some voice work on King of the Hill.
Okay.
And he liked him a lot. And so he really was just trying to get out of Mad TV as well, but he wanted to do this. So he went into Mad TV and screamed his lines during the table read for like an entire episode, and they fired him.
That would do it. That's so like these characters, though, too.
But before anybody else was cast for the entire movie, that was the guy Mike Judge was like, I want him to play Michael Bolton.
That's interesting. We also see Bill, the boss.
Yeah, Bill Lumbar.
And then who has a reserved parking spot and is kind of whistling his way into work, right? And then we see Melvin waiting for the bus. So I think that was kind of like, those are very small details of the minor characters, but I thought that was kind of interesting as well.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're at work. And the classic scene that I think everybody in almost any job has been through this before, where you make one small mistake and like 8 people come and talk to you about it.
Yeah.
The TPS reports. I think this is interesting too, because you usually start off a movie with like an inciting incident, and I feel like they did exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it was just the inciting incident is just the mundane life that he has.
Yes. And the annoyance and frustration. This is exactly why I don't have this kind of a job.
The fact that their company works on computer software for banking for the Y2K is so 90s, right?
What's hilarious when he said that, we're all putting in extra hours for this year 2000 switchover. I was like, I forgot that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. And, people talk about Y2K like joking now. If you were not around really then and you're a younger listener, there was a thing where all the computers had been programmed to have 2-digit year on all the software. And so there was a concern that there would be a huge upset because in the year 2000, you can't have just the 00.
Right.
So you'd have to reprogram all the software to have a 4-digit year instead of a 2-digit year. To avoid any problems. And we make fun of it, but the reality is that this is a problem that they came up with a solution, and people like the guys at this company worked hard to make it not be a problem.
Yeah.
But we all sat there like, on New Year's, like, are the lights gonna go out or not?
Is this the end?
I remember we watched the ball drop in like different, like it was a news thing where you would watch the ball drop in different time zones and like, okay, Tokyo seems okay.
Right.
So now, especially once the ball dropped on the East Coast for midnight, people are like, okay, well, New York Stock Exchange, like, isn't gonna fall apart.
Right.
The lights are still on, all of that. Like the opposite of what happened with the pandemic, right? But, so that's kind of funny. I also love the detail of that in Michael Bolton's office cubicle, they've all decorated them a tiny bit. Mm-hmm. And if you notice in the back, he's got these rapper posters everywhere. But yeah, he's told 3 times by middle management about the TPS reports.
Right. Yeah. And
this is my purgatory, by the way. Yeah. This is like, I can't,
Yeah, he's told by everybody, like, multiple times. That's all he hears about. Even when he's like, he goes and gets Samir and Michael and is like, let's go get coffee next door. Yeah. And they're like, it's like 10:30. He's like, I can't deal right now. Right. And he goes, and even when they go over to have a cup of coffee, Samir's like, what's this I hear about your TPS reports? Like his friends have heard about it already in their brain.
Yeah. And the micromanagement.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And, later we'll get into some of the things he tells, like, the people who are doing the assessment of the workplace. But this is a major issue that I had with this type of work environment. That, like, just let me do my job.
Yeah.
Just let me do my job. I don't need, like, 8 people or even 1 person. Even teaching, I had that one time with somebody who, like, wanted to see my lesson plans. And I'm like, we're in a college. I've been doing this for a while. Like, come on.
Yeah.
We have academic freedom. I can't deal with you.
Yeah. So then at the break, we get to meet Joanna for the first time.
Yes.
Right? Who's played by Jennifer Aniston, which was Mike Judge's way of shutting up the studio by getting a big name.
Yeah, and also she's really the only female in this. This is because it's IT, because it's tech, especially at that time.
Yeah.
It's a very male-driven industry.
There's a couple women you see, like, that are small, have small sidelines.
Like the Case of the Mondays.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was brought in, and actually, even after they brought her in, the studio was concerned because her part was so small.
Mm.
So they added the subplot about her with her boss with the flare.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just to give her a little bit more. And that was actually such an add-on that her boss, Stan, is played by Mike Judge. He was just like, I'll do it.
And, well, it also, because of the way that they film those, it's a little disconnected, but it also gives her own storyline.
Right.
So that it's not just about her boyfriend, that she really hates this job. She thinks the flare is stupid. She just wants to, this is what they're calling right now quiet quitting. Where, and quiet quitting to me is like just doing your job and that's it.
Right.
Like, you're not putting in any extra effort. She's like, I'm serving the tables. Like, do I have to have, if you want 37 pieces of flair, then make that the rule.
Right. Because she has 15, which is the rule. You have to have a minimum of 15.
This is the thing, too, for my job now, we do have a union, and this is the kind of thing that the union has to deal with all the time. Mm. Like, if you want us to teach 6 classes all the time, then just make that be how many classes we teach. But don't tell us that we can teach 5 and then be like, oh, but, you know, we really need you to, if you really wanted to serve the school, you'd take that 6th. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's those kind of things. Yeah, and I'm sure you've had stuff like that at your job.
Yeah.
One of your jobs, too, where they want you to go above and beyond, but they're not. It's not like you're getting a raise. It's not like, so just for background, Steve, one time they let somebody go at the company you were at,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
They had 2 people doing the position. They put it down to 1 person.
Yeah.
So then you were covering the whole state.
Right.
Did you get any extra?
No, I was just expected to cover the whole state. Yeah.
Right. Just you by yourself.
Yeah, to do what 2 people had been doing.
So what he ended up doing was like, he'd have like a training he had to do like in Long Island. And then like a day later in Buffalo. Yeah. And then a day later up in like the Adirondacks. Right. And then back down to like Elmira or Binghamton. And you guys don't know, like a lot of people
Those are 8-9 hours apart sometimes. Yeah.
That's the thing. New York State is actually a lot bigger than people realize. So it is, that's quite a bit. And that's just, there are those types of things that like, that corporations do to show that they just don't care about you. Right. You know? So at any rate, we have, Jennifer Aniston, and he says, no, I want to work it out with Anne. Now, I don't want to flirt with her or ask her out. I'm trying to work things out with Anne. Yes. But I have the feeling
that Anne may be cheating on me. And both his friends just go, yeah. Like, very nonchalant, but like completely in agreement. To the point where he's like, he kind of side looks at him like, what?
And I kept thinking, I wonder if there were some deleted scenes, because we only had Anne in one scene, which is the hypnosis scene. Yes. We hear from her later, but we don't see her again.
Right, it's just the hypnosis
scene. And I guess it's not necessarily needed, but I think that if we had an interaction with the 2 of them to show maybe that their relationship is toxic or mundane, just like his workplace. Right. Right? Because it is supposed to be it's an occupational hypnotherapist. Yes. Instead of an occupational therapist.
Right. An occupational hypnotherapist.
And she wants him to go. So it's kind of seems like it's hinted at that she's pushing him to do more with his career, and that he kind of is drawn to Jennifer Aniston because they're very similar in that they're like, they want to have a life. They just want to do this and get it done with and then have a life, right? And they don't care about like climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
Having 28 pieces of flair.
But yeah, Tina doesn't seem to be necessarily a great choice for him and doesn't seem to be completely committed. In fact, not long after that, we meet Lawrence, his neighbor.
Yes.
Played by Diedrich Bader. So yeah, played by Diedrich Bader from the Drew Carey Show.
Right.
And he says to him, "How's Tina been? I haven't seen you."
Anne.
Oh, Anne, sorry. He says to him, "How's Anne been? I haven't seen her a lot lately." And he said, "Oh, well, we've been busy. You know, sometimes I get the feeling she might be cheating on me." And Lawrence says, "Yeah, I get that."
Yeah. So this is the character that was also based on somebody Mike Judge knew. Mm-hmm. And at the time that he was working in this office job, he had a neighbor who he was friends with. And the neighbor was an auto mechanic. And he was working less hours. He was outside. He was working with people, but also doing something he loved. And Mike Judge was like, this whole thing where like, we're told to take out crazy student loans and go to college and get a steady job. Like, I'm not happy, and this guy seems happy.
Yeah.
And I think that seems to be one of the things that propelled him to do more with, like, the animation and the comedy, that even though those weren't really stable things to do, that he wanted to more, like, follow a passion. So I thought it was interesting that that character, obviously, like a lot of these, are nowhere in the cartoons.
Right.
But we haven't even mentioned yet Milton.
Yeah, Milton we meet day one and we see him. Milton is almost like a subplot.
Yeah, I think that was a smart choice. Don't you?
I do too, yeah.
I think that if Milton had been the main character, I don't think you can carry a movie.
No.
Because he is sort of, you do feel bad for him.
Yeah.
But you are as annoyed with him as the other people are. And I also think this is like, these are characters in an office, right? There's the lady who's always chirpy and chipper, and there's the middle manager who doesn't really do anything but look over your shoulder. And then there's the person who is really incompetent and shouldn't be there.
Yes.
And they just kind of keep trying. Now here they move his desk, but in reality, I've seen people like this be shuffled from department to department.
Yeah, which is basically, they're not doing departments, but they're moving him around just to getting him like worse spot to worse spot to worse spot.
In a school, what happens is that this is somebody who, like, they'll be in HR and they'll be horrible with people. So they'll move that and they'll be like, well, you know, it doesn't seem, but we like you for no reason. Mm-hmm. And then they'll move them to like, now they're in like admissions.
Right.
And then they're working with students, and that doesn't really go too great, but it goes okay. So then they move them over to like advising.
Yeah.
And then eventually, many times this type of person, now Milton is really supposed to be kind of a loser. Mm-hmm. But many times, this is the type of person who ends up being like vice president of a company.
Right.
Because they keep failing upward, right? Or it's that principle where you're promoted, you do really well where you are, and then you're promoted to a thing that you can't do at all, and then you're incompetent.
Yeah.
Kind of like the middle manager here, Bill. But yeah, it's interesting to me kind of sociologically how that works. But so we also meet Tom, and Tom is worried about these consultants coming in, and he says this idea for a mat with all these conclusions on it that you jump to.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea.
If this were now, he'd have a Kickstarter campaign, but nobody would contribute. I actually think if you turned it into a game,
yeah.
And then maybe if you jump to a certain conclusion, it's like a piece on a board, and then you have to, then something, but it's not. It's just a
This is the kind of guy that has an office job, but he's like, he watches a lot of like History Channel and stuff, and he's just like, all it takes is one big idea. Like the Slinkies guy was poor, and then now he's $1 million, right? And so he's looking for like the one big break.
This kind of, again, thinking about it now, Steve, it reminded me of Cheers, because these are all like archetypes in an office. Right?
Yes.
Like, we know somebody who worked in an office, but their big idea was to do like a restaurant in a food court but it was going to be like way different from any other thing that's ever been done in a food court before.
Right.
And it'll be totally different. And like, will it? Do you feel like that's going to go well? You know, that kind of thing. I knew somebody who wanted to sell just like in-game things.
Like in-game add-ons, like in an app?
Yeah, in an app, and they quit their tenured teaching position to sell in-game items. And that was going to be the big idea that they had.
Oh boy.
And you can do that, but you have to know the tech of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And this person did. And then of course, like, then the game became less popular. Now it's no longer
Nobody
exists.
cared, yeah.
Well, and I think too, if I'm not mistaken, the developers created a thing where you could just buy the in-game stuff from them.
Yeah.
Like at that. So then they didn't have that either. And then they were like, well, now do I go back to teaching? I have a PhD. Like, okay. And sometimes the big ideas work. I don't want to like put people's dreams by, but a lot of times they're dumb like this. And then we come to the hypnosis scene.
Yeah, the hypnosis scene, which is really the turning point for the movie. And it's done kind of early because a lot of this movie takes place, you know, is all about what happens once he doesn't care.
Yes.
But yeah, you have the hypnotist, and you can tell as he's hypnotizing Peter that he's not healthy.
No.
Like he's having chest pain.
They're showing him sweating.
He's profusely sweating.
Yeah.
He's barely making it through. And he just basically, you know, he's like, close your eyes. Be in a peaceful place. You have no care in the world. Nothing bothers you, right? You're just going along. He's like, and when after I count to 3 and snap my fingers, you'll be back. And he counts to 3 and never snaps his fingers. He keels over and has a heart attack and dies.
Yeah. And Peter just kind of looks at him. Like,
yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah. And Anna's like, I can't believe you did nothing while the guy died. You just sat there. Because he's just still completely peaceful.
Now, to be fair, later he does say that also seeing that guy die made him think about his priorities. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't seem to be just a magical... It's not like Yes Man, where it's kind of similar, where he's hypnotized or makes that promise to just say yes to everything, right?
Yeah, I would almost argue here that... I mean, I don't know how Mike Judge wrote it necessarily, but I would almost argue here that, I mean, we know that for the most part, most hypnosis is kind of...
It's mumbo jumbo.
It's mumbo jumbo, yeah. Right? You can't... You even people who are, you know, experienced hypnotherapists or whatever will even tell you, you can't hypnotize someone to do something they wouldn't do.
Right.
Right? And so... I would almost argue that, is he really under hypnosis, or does this give him the excuse to kind of do what he wanted to do anyway?
Yeah. And also, what's interesting is that he does not hypnotize him to do anything except for relax.
He just relaxes him, yeah.
That's the biggest thing. And I think that this is really, to me, what I've seen in my life leads to burnout, are people who are so stressed about their job and they're so worried about these little, like, you know, all right, I'll fix the freaking TPS report and put the date on it correctly. Like, I already fixed it, not a big deal. And they stress out about these little things that in the large picture really don't matter.
Right.
Right. And so that's all he does. All he does is relax him. And then this is one of my favorite parts of the movie. And I know I don't feel like it's not quoted. It's not as well known or anything, but he has an answering machine. It's Saturday. His boss has told him to come in on Saturday. Again, for no extra pay, no overtime.
Yeah, no pay, no over. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And he calls him, and then Anne calls him, and he ignores it and keeps rolling over. And then how many messages does he have? Like,
it's like 18 or 19 messages. Yeah. It's hilarious. Bill Lumberg's on like one of the first messages, and he's like, he's like, yeah, Peter, I didn't know if maybe you thought we don't start the same time on Saturday. Yes. Yeah, we'll be in at the regular time. And then it's like later on, it's like, just so you know, it's not a half day today. Yeah.
What I love about this these are the types of bosses who say things like, nobody wants to work hard anymore. And when my husband died and I came into work the very next day.
Yeah.
And like,
well, you know, and it's also, this is a guy who's been raised up into middle management. He has no leadership skills at all.
Correct.
He's super passive aggressive.
Yeah.
And non-confrontational. So all he does is he makes everything sound like a suggestion.
Yeah.
But he expects that you're going to do it right. I'm going to need you to come in Saturday. Hey, buddy. It's not, hey, just wanted to let you know we start at the normal time, you know?
And also doesn't fire him because he can't afford to lose him either, you know?
Not to mention, he probably can't. He's probably not that high up.
It's so, yeah, exactly. But it's so like, oh my goodness. And then Peter eventually shows up. He parks in the lumber spot.
Yes.
And now he's whistling his way into work, right? And this meeting. I do not remember this, watching this part of it. It made me so angry. Like, internally angry, as if I was sitting there in the meeting. Because I've had to be at so many meetings like this, and it's such nonsense. I won't swear on the show because
are you talking about the two Bobs? Or are you talking about the two?
Before the two Bobs come up, they have a new banner that says, always think, is this good for the company? And then, and I put in my notes, the company never asks what's best for you and does not care about you.
Yes.
And they're lecturing them, and everybody's standing for a meeting because it's a full staff, whatever.
Right.
They're lecturing at them about this just mundane nonsense BS.
Yeah.
And then, and this is the part that made me so furious, then they say, and don't forget, Friday is Hawaiian Shirt Day. So you can wear your Hawaiian shirts and maybe your blue jeans. I also know many places. I don't know if you've had this, where you had to pay to wear blue jeans on Friday.
Yes, one of the places I taught at, one of the high schools,
yeah,
used to have, and they would put it towards like something for the students, but they would make you pay to put in to wear jeans or to be casual on Friday.
And then they'd come around. I have friends and family members where their principal has been like, oh, hey, Jane, I saw you didn't put in your $2 for the jeans, but you're wearing jeans.
Yeah.
Screw you.
Yeah.
And for me, here's what I've had.
You're like, listen, I'm good at what I do. I have a master's degree. I teach. You're in administration because you couldn't teach, usually. Okay. You tried it for a year or two. You got your certificate and became an administrator.
I'm be honest, that's what happens a lot of the time.
Yeah.
There's this saying, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach gym. And then I always add on, and those who can't teach gym become principals.
Right.
Because lots of people I'm not kidding.
Now you're going to have gym teachers and administrators.
But that's
emailing us and being so.
Listen, I will say this right now. I have two wonderful administrators. The reason that they're good is because they both taught for over 20 years.
Right.
If you only teach for 2 years and then you're an administrator for 30, you have no idea what teaching today is like.
Right.
It's completely different than it was when I started even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And but for me, my version of this is that I sit and hear a bunch of nonsense about some quote unquote new teaching technique, evidence-based, that I already learned about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they tell us how to do our jobs and that we'll have to do them differently. And it's not really that different. And it's a 4-hour meeting. And then they say, okay, but everybody gets a free lunch today for coming in. And this did happen to me very recently. And when I went to lunch, what do you think happened, Steve?
There wasn't anything you could
There was nothing for me to eat.
Yeah, this is...
I go in and it's pasta day and there's nothing for me to eat. Yeah. And I say, hi, I have celiacs and I'm gluten-free. Do you have anything? And they say, no. And I go, okay, is there a vending machine? And they say, yeah, but we haven't stocked that since the beginning of summer in May.
And you go, I'll go burn this place down.
No, I go, okay, I'll just have my Welch's fruit snacks then. And that is what I end up doing. And so I should bring my lunch, but still.
This Hawaiian shirt thing is like, it's a Pavlovian, like, you know, motivation technique that they've been using on everyone since you're a child, right?
Yeah.
When you're in school and it's like, if everybody does their homework for 3 months, you'll get a pizza party, right? It's the adult version of that.
Yeah. Now, from their perspective, Megan, you're complaining about a free lunch.
Right.
I mean, or we also many times are given a free cup of coffee, which I don't drink coffee.
Right.
I took the little coupon and I said, can I have hot chocolate? And they said no. So that's okay. But the thing is that, you know, from I think from an administrator's perspective, they would be like, but we tried. And I'd be like, right, but I just want you to like, just be kind when you see me in the hallway. And I have that now where I work, but I haven't always.
Yeah.
But at any rate.
They've announced during one of the meetings as well that they have 2 consultants.
Bob and Bob.
The Bobs, which have been brought in to basically cut the fat.
Yes.
Right, they've come they're efficiency experts, but everyone knows they're pretty much, they're tomahawk guys, right? They come in and they're hatchet men.
So Tom's up first. And he's been worried about this for years.
Yeah.
And he tried to warn everybody. And they go through what he does. And again, he's like a middleman who goes between the customers and the engineers. And they keep saying to him, but like, couldn't the customers just go directly? And he's like, no, I have people skills.
Yeah. And the one Bob who does most of the talking is played by John C. McGinley.
Yes.
Who's awesome.
Yeah, he's great in this role.
You know, most people remember him from Scrubs as Dr. Cox.
Yes.
He's very sarcastic. He has a presence. And the funny thing is, too, he read originally for Bill Lumbergh.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see him in doing that role.
And which he would have been good. The studio kind of liked him because he was kind of known.
Yeah.
But Gary Cole did such a, like, he read and Mike Judge was like, that's him.
Yeah. Gary Cole is one of those and I guess to a certain extent, John McGinley, although we know him more now because he was on Scrubs for so long, but Gary Cole is one of these character actors who like morphs into whatever character they become. But the 2 Bobs, what I love about how these 2 actors play it, they play it like they're a married couple.
Yeah, it's John McGinley and Paul Wilson. And the 2 of them play off each other.
Yes. And you can tell that they're maybe ad-libbing a tiny bit as well. But the yelling of I have people skills, the explanation that they go, so you take the things from the customers and go to the engineers. Well, my secretary does. They're like, what do you do all day? And again, this is a type of office person that I have known, and typically there's no efficiency expert to figure it out. But I'm like, I don't understand what you do all day long. What are you doing with your time? Then we have Michael Bolton, and they go on and on about his name. You must really love his music.
Yeah, which is a huge running gag here, right? Every time they say his name's Michael Bolton, everyone's like, the singer?
Yeah.
And he hates the singer.
Yeah. And then we cut over to the Jennifer Aniston storyline because now Anne's broken up with Peter on his answering machine, and
because everything's cool.
Yeah, everything's cool. And he's just like, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch?" And she starts going over the special.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, we have." And he's like, "No, I was asking you."
Yeah.
What you're doing for lunch? Like, do you want to have lunch with me?
I do think, Jennifer Aniston is gorgeous, but I feel like they're equally matched here, that they kind of both look like girl next door.
Jennifer Aniston is very attractive, but she does play that, like, girl next door, like you're saying. She plays that girl next door, not average girl, but she plays like an everyday girl well.
Yeah, and they're both, I feel like what's interesting to me is that other than Friends, I have found, I think she's a little bit bland in terms of her performances. And I've seen Ron Livingston and other stuff, and I would kind of say the same thing about him. And here, I think that works for them, because that's the deal.
Yeah.
That's the character they're supposed to be. Now, not all the time for either one. They've done other roles that are good, but there's been, like, after Friends, she did a number of movies in the late 90s, early 2000s, where it didn't seem to work.
The greatest quote of this whole interaction is, I don't really like talking about my flair.
Yeah. It's the line read, the way she says it. She's like, I don't really like talking about my flair.
Yeah.
Because she has to talk about it all the freaking time.
Yeah, all these stupid buttons that she has to wear. Like TGI Fridays and Bennigan's and these types of things.
Yes. And this was like the rise in the mid-late 90s. This was like Applebee's was everywhere. Mm-hmm. And TGI Fridays and all of these chain restaurants where, as her manager says, people come for the fun and the atmosphere, but like it's all the same kind of food. Like it's just weird, bland American food.
Yeah. This place is Tchotchkes. But there's also a Flingers and something else right across the street. And like there's 3 of the same type of restaurant.
So Flingers is where they're having their date.
Yes.
And is that where...
Flingers, the Stan, the manager, I think, is played by Mike Judge.
Nice. Okay. So he did a little cameo in his movie. That's kind of cool. So then we go back over, and we find out that Milton he's never been told that he was laid off.
Yeah. We have, you have before that, after asking her out, Peter goes back over to work to pick something up. Because he doesn't plan on working. Right. But he goes over to get something. He's not going
to go back.
Yeah. He goes over to get something, and they go, "Where have you been? The Bobs. You have an appointment with the Bobs." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he walks in and has probably the greatest interaction in the movie.
Well, first of all, he starts pouring himself a cup
water.
Of water.
Yeah. Everyone else has been sweating in front of these 2 guys. Yeah. And he's just not impressed.
And what he tells them... To me, I love that he is being honest here, and to me it felt very honest, too. He tells them flat out, this is kind of what you would like to tell the CEO of your company. I have no incentive to work hard.
Yeah.
When I do well, nobody acknowledges it. When I mess up, I have 8 bosses telling me that I messed up.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems with the American workplace, I think. Like, just... acknowledge, if you just gave a little acknowledgement more than a Hawaiian shirt day to people who did well, gave them a little incentive, they say to him, what would matter, stock options? He goes, I don't know, Bob.
He's like, maybe, I don't know.
And that's the thing. We know a local company that does do that. They give stock options and people can, right?
Yeah.
Stewards?
Yep. Yeah, there is a local company that does, it's like a convenience store, but they give stock options to all of their employees, and they can really add up, actually.
And that's one of the reasons people love working there, because they know it's not just that like $15 an hour. It's also some benefits that they wouldn't get in another place, right? Yeah. So it is there are those kind of things, but I love that he's like, I don't know if that would do it.
And he's like, it's not that I'm lazy. It's just that I just don't care.
Yeah.
He's like, why should I? Like, it's funny because he's just completely, they're like taken aback because he's basically says, I come in and I stare at my desk for like 45 minutes. Yeah. And then he's like, to be honest, I do probably like 2 hours of honest work in a week.
Well, I think, to be honest, this is one of the reasons I think that in some companies productivity went up when everybody was home for COVID. Yeah. Because you can be more productive during that core period of time, and then you can get up and take your dog for I don't want to say the word WALK because our dog's in the room and she'll go nuts. Yeah. But you can take your dog for a W. Yeah. For 10 minutes and then come back in. And then when you come back in, you feel a little refreshed, and then you can, take an hour and a half for lunch and do grocery shopping maybe, or have a longer lunch, or go to the gym, and you can still get all your work done in a day. Yeah. You know what I mean? And have a little bit more flex time. Now, for some people, it did not work well at all. Right. But I think that he's the kind of person that might have worked for.
So it goes into a montage of him not caring about work, but like going to like, he's fishing with Lawrence, his neighbor, and with Joanna.
Yeah.
And he's like watching Kung Fu with her at his apartment, which it was neat because it kind of shows you that their relationship is progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And also that he's just not going to work. And then he does show up for work.
Kind of when he feels like it.
He does show up for work and he comes in and he grabs the maintenance guy's screwdriver and unscrews the door handle and kicks it open.
Yeah.
And then he takes the screwdriver with him and he unscrews his cubicle and knocks a whole wall out.
And they're playing Damn It Feels Good to Be a Gangster in the background, which is the best choice of music. It's the best choice of music. So
it's
now
he's
able to look out the window, and I had a job where I felt like smothered there, and it was teaching, but we would have these horrible meetings like they have, and I would stare out the window and I'd just think, I could be hiking right now.
Yeah.
Or like, I could be fishing. I could be doing anything but this. Oh my goodness. So great. When we get back, we have this blonde guy we've never seen before, one of their coworkers. And he is telling them, about Milton? No, about Tom.
Yeah.
He tells them about Tom, how Tom got laid off, and then, I love this too. This is the only place where you have to suspend disbelief. Tom got laid off. Then he attempted self-harm.
Yes.
He changed his mind at the last minute. He backed out of his driveway and he got smashed into by a drunk driver.
Yeah.
And now he got
gets a big settlement.
A big settlement. But it's all happened in like a day and a half.
Yeah.
And like settlements take weeks and years and whatever. But yeah, that is kind of hysterical. And then we see him again later at Tom's party. And in the meantime, Joanna gets fired. Or quits. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
She gives them the finger, literally, to express herself.
Right, because she's kind of sick of it. But, yeah, there's an interesting... In the office, when he goes back into the office, Peter, there's an interesting thing where Bill Lumbaugh comes by, and the cubicle has been opened up and thrown on the ground, and Peter is playing Tetris eating Cheetos.
Yes.
And Bill Lumbaugh is like... He's like, Peter, I see something's happened here. Like, do you have those TPS reports? And Peter looks back and he has a dead fish that's been skinned on the TPS reports.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. And he's like, I'm going to need you to have them to me by the end of the day. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And this is the thing. This is the problem with a manager like Bill Lumberg, right? Who is really passive aggressive but doesn't know how to lead.
Yes.
Is it only works with people who buy into that. Right. And Peter doesn't anymore. So there's nothing, he doesn't know how to like be the heavy hand.
Correct.
So he's like, I guess we're going to have a meeting about that, huh? And he's like, Lumberg, go away. I'm busy right now. He's like, and I got a meeting with the Bobs in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And Lumberg's like, what? I didn't know about that. He's like, yeah, they called me at home.
Which is, by the way, the only reason he went in that day.
Yeah.
The fish is from his fishing trip. He was out fishing with Joanna and his neighbor.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I think and then Bill Lumberg goes, yeah, so, and he just walks around.
He just walks around him. And then Lumberg he doesn't know what to do. So he's like, we'll have somebody clean this up for you. Like, he doesn't know. What's
funny is that if he had kept that job, if he could have set that boundary.
Yeah.
And then that would have been it. And he might have like enjoyed it more if, and obviously you don't do it in that way.
Yeah.
But you say to your boss, like, no, I don't work on Saturdays.
You have
and then you get replaced with a recent graduate.
You have two opposites here of him who's just like, he walks over Lumberg now.
Yes.
And then Lumberg completely manhandling Milton.
Yes.
Who doesn't speak up for himself.
That's true. And Milton's desk has been moved around the office, then it was put in the corner, then it was put in a storage closet.
And then it was in a steam room in the basement.
In the basement by the boiler system. Yeah. And he said that was the last straw. And of course, his red swinger stapler, which didn't exist, by the way. They painted it to make it more apparent for the movie.
Yeah.
And then after this, Swinger started making a red stapler.
Well, also, the guy who plays Milton, he was wearing glasses that were so thick, he had to wear contacts to try to see through them. So he had no depth perception because of the glasses. So the red stapler made it easy to find the stapler when he had to, like, grab it or touch it.
Yeah, in my notes I thought Milton was funny as a kid, and now I just feel sorry for him. It's just making me angry and sad.
It really is kind of sad.
So at any rate, we cut back to Joanna, and she's quitting because they bother her again about the flare, which is very similar to the TPS reports. It's just the restaurant version. So she gives the finger to her manager, and then some customers.
Yeah.
Who happen to be sitting there. So Peter realizes after his meeting with the Bobs that they're laying off Samir and Michael.
Yeah.
But they want to make him manager.
They're promoting him.
Of 4 people.
Yeah. Because they don't think he's been challenged enough.
But
he's a straight shooter.
Which is the thing that when they're meeting about him with Lumberg, he goes, well, I don't know. Peter's had this problem with his TPS reports. They go, yeah. And then they take out his file.
Yeah. And they go, what do you do, Lumberg? And Lumberg shuts up.
Yeah. But the thing is that this is what happens with these efficiency experts, that they'll tell people at a company, well, you could fire all of these lower people and hire new recent graduates or people overseas and make more money. But they never look at the fact that there are 8 middle managers who are not doing anything.
Right.
And so what really efficiency are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you doing or looking at? So at any rate, then we come to the third act.
Yeah.
Where Michael has some software.
Right. Michael has an idea in the software, and he mentioned it earlier in the movie, but now Peter goes to him and says, would that really work? And basically, it's based off of an idea in Superman 3, the movie.
Yes.
Which is that, bank transactions all have, like, decimals, and they all have, like, percentages of pennies, right?
Yes.
But if you could shave off one of those and dump it into an account, it's not a lot of money. It's like a 100th of a penny, but thousands of transactions build up money.
So let's say that they're doing like billable hours.
Right.
And somebody bills them for like 16 minutes.
Right.
So it ends up, instead of being a round number, it'll be like 13. We talk about it just in hundreds, $13.99.
Yeah.
But it's really 13.996.
Right.
So the program takes that little 6, that little half a penny.
Then we get rounded anyway.
A hay penny, as you will. They take that little hay penny and they deposit that into this account.
Right.
They round it up and deposit it into account. So pennies then become eventually dollars, and it's supposed to, over many years, it will end up being a lump sum that the 3 of them can split. And what happens instead, Steve?
Yeah, but unfortunately, one of the things that Michael Bolton had never mentioned before is that he has a reoccurring problem with decimals in the wrong places. Yes! Which is hilarious. Right? So in like one day, it takes $350,000.
Yes! Which they're gonna notice.
They're gonna notice that. Right? And of course, the idea creates a breakup with Peter and Joanna as well. Because she doesn't think, she goes, that's stealing. And he goes, no, it's just like 100th of a penny. He's like,
a penny you don't own.
He's like, but like to take a penny, leave a penny trays? He's like, it's like that, but like a couple 100,000 times.
and this is one of my, again, Jennifer Aniston with some of these line reads. This is another great line read, like, I don't like talking about my flair. She goes, I don't know if I get it. And he goes, okay, let me explain it again. And she slurps her Slurpee. She's got a huge Slurpee from 7-Eleven. And she goes, okay. And I don't know why. It's just such a natural, thing that you would do.
Yeah.
Let me think about it while I'm drinking my drink. I don't know. Yeah. It's just so funny to me.
But that and the fact that he finds out at the party that she slept with Lumberg.
Right.
But he finds out later it was not Bill.
Yes.
his terrible boss. It was someone else. But between those two things, it causes the breakup.
Yeah. So the $305,000, the three guys find out about it. And this is, again, old tech alert, because they look up white collar crime in the dictionary. And it is a big ass dictionary.
Yes.
That he has in his apartment. And I put in my notes, this was filmed in 98, the same year that Google came out.
Right.
So did we have Ask Jeeves? I think we had Ask Jeeves.
Mm-hmm.
But also they're computer programmers, but they're looking it up in a dictionary.
Right.
Well, probably because if there were a search history, especially at their work, it might be traced.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. But that was kind of funny. So Milton this entire time has been saying that he is going to...
Like, this is the end, the
let
last
the place
straw.
on fire.
I'm going to burn this place down.
Yeah. Peter, after reconciling with Joanna, realizes that he needs to take the blame because he doesn't want his friends to have to go down for this. So he writes a note, he puts the money in an envelope, he puts it under Lundberg's door with the explanation of what he did, and then he kind of waits.
Yeah.
And then Milton finds his stapler, finds the envelope.
Yeah. And then everyone gets to work that morning and the whole building is burned down. It's on fire. My
favorite part of this is that as it's burning, the chipper lady who has a case, somebody has a case of the Mondays lady, her cubicle is shown, and there's all of these Kathy and Dilbert comic strips.
That are just like shriveling and burning. Yes.
Because those were both like about this like middle class working experience, you know? It just made me laugh so much. It's such a good detail. And then he ends up joining his friend from next door.
Lawrence, yeah.
At the construction company.
Yeah, so he gets away with it basically because they never, all the computers and everything burn up, right? Yeah. And so, he ends up on the work crew that's cleaning up the burnt down building.
Yeah, and he finds the red stapler.
And he kind of enjoys doing it. Samir and Michael get a job at another company that basically does the same thing.
Right.
Right. And they are like, we can get you a job too there. And he was like, no, I kind of like this. Like, just out doing it. Like, it's open it's in the air. It suits him better than being in a cubicle.
And again, I think that this was a point where people started to have the conversation of, and look, I will say this as a caveat. I'm a college professor. I think that college opens doors for people. I think it gives people opportunities. I don't, though, think it's for everyone.
No.
And I don't think that it has to be for everyone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And there was this push, and we talked about this, Steve, even with the with Camp Nowhere, that you have to, everything is for your resume.
Right.
And starting in elementary school and middle school, what classes you take and what activities you do, and you have to get into a good college, and even at this point, 80s and 90s, you have to get into a good preschool.
Right.
For many, like, income sets.
If you're going to get into an Ivy League college, right?
If you're going to get into an Ivy League college, you have to start them early, and they'd have, like, kids try to play violin at 3 and all of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's not the track for everybody. And then what does it lead to? You've had no childhood, and you're in this mundane office job you hate. Yeah,
you've been basically corralled into a career that you don't like, that's not fulfilling. And I just think it was, he kind of learns at the end that there's nothing wrong with doing work, but you can find work that you like.
And this is a very hands-on, physical labor job that doesn't require a college degree. And they never talk about that aspect, but I think it's like very heavily implied.
But him and Lawrence are the two that are happy.
Yeah. Well, and I think, having said that though, Samir wanted a more stable position. Right. That's what he wanted the whole time.
And Michael was a programmer. Like,
and
that's
Michael
what he liked.
Loved doing programming. Yeah. And so for them, that's the right path, but for him, it isn't.
Yeah.
And I know that Mike Judge wanted to, I don't know how he thought the movie should have ended in this last third. Maybe they go to jail. Maybe they make all the money and they burn the place down like Fight Club. I don't know. But, I think that to me, it ends in a very good way, showing, same thing with Joanna. Joanna doesn't quit waitressing altogether.
Right.
She likes being a waitress, sort of, to the extent
Yeah.
she likes it. She just wanted to be at a better place with cooler uniforms and a better atmosphere.
Right.
Right? Like, so she just goes next door to Slingers or Zingers or whatever. Or Flingers?
Slingers and Zingers. There's like
it's whatever,
places.
yeah. So I think that, to me, it ended in a good way.
Yeah.
So what did the critics say about it?
So, as you you talked a little bit about you remembering theaters and things like that, right? It made $12 million in theaters, but it cost almost 10. It cost between 8 and 10, so that's not what people would call a success at all.
No.
Right? And $12 million is not a big movie block, but even in 99. It was, I think, 8th in its opening weekend. And so it really wasn't big, although it went on to make $8 million in DVD.
Okay.
And a VHS.
Yeah, the VHS of this, I think this is one of the last movies that had a big VHS push.
Yeah, it had a much bigger home release because some people saw it and then told their friends about it, or, it just had a bigger, and it wasn't marketed great, right? And that was something Mike Judge even he hated the poster, which was the guy covered in all these Post-it notes.
Right.
He said it looked kind of like Big Bird.
Right.
And it didn't tell much about the story.
Yeah.
Jennifer Aniston wasn't on the poster because she wasn't that big of a role. Right?
Yeah.
And so there really wasn't a whole lot.
I mean, but they put Drew Barrymore on the Scream poster.
Yeah. It was like Office Space, like Work Sucks or something like that. Like, it wasn't the marketing just wasn't done great on it.
The other thing, too, I think what happened, from what I can recall, is that so many people saw it, again, edited, like I did on Comedy Central, wanted to own an unedited copy. And that's one of the things that kind of spurred them to buy a VHS or a DVD of it.
Yeah.
I think my brother might have had a copy of it. Sorry, go ahead.
That's
so
all right.
Did critics rate it pretty well?
Yeah,
or?
Roger Ebert, who we've talked about before on here, gave it 3 out of 4 stars. And he said, Mike Judge treats his characters a little like cartoons, but that works. Because in this specific instance, the nuances of behavior aren't necessary because in a cubicle world like this, personalities are amplified.
Yeah, and again, they're supposed to be archetypes, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so, he thought that was pretty good. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote that Ron Livingston, who played Peter, was nicely cast. He's a young guy whose imagination and capacity for happiness are kind of things that make him miserable. Yes. Right? The fact that he wants to be happy.
That's but also that he's kind and compassionate, and that doesn't work in that environment.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I never thought about that.
And so, but it did have a kind of a big cult following, right? And so in 2008, Entertainment Weekly named Office Space one of the 100 best films from 1983 to 2008. It was 73 on the list.
Why is it 83 to 08?
It's 25 years.
Oh, I was like, that's such a weird.
And they also named it to a different list that year, which was they ranked it 5th on the list of 25 great comedies in that 25-year period.
Okay, interesting.
So that's a lot of recognition later at 2000. Yeah. You're talking 9 years after release.
Yeah, because look, this isn't like the kind of movie you would win an Academy Award for Best Acting.
No, nobody would.
But it really is more about American culture, especially at that time. But I think still, to me, it rings true today. My question for you is, Steve.
Yes.
Besides the Milton character, why do you think that kids liked this movie so much? Like, I know a lot of my brother's 4 years younger than me, so he was still in high school when this came out. He and his friends loved this movie.
Part of it, I think, is that, and this was on the critics. I just gave you some good critical response, right? 2 of the more negative critical responses. One of them was that some critics thought that it ended abruptly. The other thing is, and I think this is what connects to people, that they said it felt like this was just a movie made out of a number of sketches, and teenagers like that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. What I'm saying is that, one of the qualities of Gen Xers is that we don't trust authority.
Right.
And this movie, I think, is, like Reality Bites, a very Gen X movie. In that all of the people are older Gen Xers, obviously, compared to us, right? But not really by that much. And yeah, there's just something about that. I don't know that Bill Lumbergh would be a boomer necessarily, though Tom would be. But I think you're right. The sketch nature of it, the fact that Comedy Central was big with young teenagers at that point. But the fact is that as I'm talking about it, I guess my point was in asking that none of them have worked in an office, right? They have, though, been in school.
Exactly.
And I think that many schools are set up a lot like this.
Very much so. It's that same kind of oppressive atmosphere.
And I'm not, I was going to say, I'm not just talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not just talking about from a teacher's perspective, but, you and I are really big proponents of, like, project-based education and homeschooling and things like that. And I think, you have to sit in a desk for 8 hours a day doing mundane work that you don't understand the point of.
Yeah. Kids were not designed to learn or to grow that way, and neither were people. And this movie's kind of about that. And
I think that that's one of the things that the feeling of powerlessness that comes with being a kid in that situation.
It resonates.
Yeah.
And they can pick up on that.
I think it does. Yeah. I think that might be why. It's very interesting.
And it did pick up a lot. Like I said, now this movie on Rotten Tomatoes has over 100 reviews, and it has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
So it's scored very highly, and many people love this movie. Like you mentioned Office Space, and I very rarely have ever had anyone give a negative comment about
I never hear somebody go, "Oh, I hate that movie."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Judge himself, he was disappointed with the theater release, obviously. I mean, 12 million is not huge domestic growth, right? And he kind of moved on and worked on what eventually became the movie Extract.
Which is also kind of set in an office and has Jason Bateman in it, right?
Fox suggested for that movie that he listen to them this time on casting, which might be Jason Bateman's a little bit of a bigger name than Ron Livingston.
Yeah, because that was after Arrested Development, before Ozarks for Jason Bateman.
Although as he was working on that, he soon learned that actually Office Space hadn't gone unnoticed. And like Jim Carrey invited him to his house, and Chris Rock like left him a voicemail about it, and then like he had dinner with Madonna.
Interesting.
He just like there was all these people in the industry that had seen it and liked it.
Oh, that's well, I think that's the thing, that it wasn't initially a critical baby, but again, when you look at it by the other ones I mentioned of the Office dystopia, being John Malkovich, The Matrix, the Fight Club, to me, there's markers in those that make them feel a little dated. This, I think, you could put this out now and I think people would relate to it just as much. I think it would feel like it came out, other than looking things up in the dictionary. Even then you might only have to give one line, hey, we don't want to get caught, let's look it up in the dictionary instead of online.
Right, right.
But the software engineering aspect of it as well. So that's what the critics thought. What did we think? What's your overall 1 out of 10 staplers?
I think for staplers here, I think I've got to go with a 10.
Wow.
And I was unsure, but the way I look at it is, if somebody asks me, give me your top 5 comedies, I think this might make the list.
Really?
And that's how I would, if I give something a 10, it's gotta be something that would make like my top 5 list.
Okay.
Right? Of its genre.
Alright.
And just right now, I'm trying to think of other comedies that I think would beat this out. And there are some, but not a lot. It's the kind of humor I enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm not as funny, I'm not into like crass kind of like fart humor.
No, yeah.
And this is more it's just more of the kind of sarcastic humor I enjoy.
Listen, after Camp Nowhere, this was a breath of fresh air.
So I would have to go with 10 Staplers because of that reason. So what about you?
I think I'm pretty high. I think I'm probably at an 8. And I'm kind of in between right now, and I'll say why. Oh, first of all, we never talked about Stephen Root, who plays Milton.
Phenomenal.
He was also in news radio. He looks totally different.
He's a chameleon. He can take on any character.
He's amazing in this. It's difficult for me because I've seen this or parts of this so many times that I almost had the movie memorized. We haven't done Back to the Future almost for that same reason. It's hard for me to look at it with fresh eyes. And I haven't seen it, I have to say. I don't think I've seen it in at least 10, 15 years.
Okay.
But I watched it so much back then on Comedy Central. I'd have that on a lot, when I worked on stuff. Homework or grading or whatever the case may be. I like to have TV on in the background. So, yeah, it's hard. I think, though, looking at it completely fresh, watching the full thing all the way through uncut, I guess I'll give it a 9. It's not in my top 10 list by any means, because I do find it funny. I do think it is sketches put together. I wish that there were more female characters to kind of show that aspect of things. I wish that Jennifer Aniston's part had been teased out a little bit more. I would have liked to see Rob Livingston's character Peter with Anne a little bit more. I think that, so there's that kind of aspect. But for the most part, even though it's, sketches and a little bit episodic, this is a solid movie. All the performances are wonderful. The tone is interesting. They do make it seem real to a certain extent.
Right.
A realistic office space. I think that, I don't know that you could have the show The Office without this movie. I really don't. And they don't have much in common other than the way that they were filmed, because the initial seasons of the British Office and then the American were filmed like this, very deliberately mundane, bland, and little things become big issues, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the point. So,
So you're going to go a 9.
I'm gonna give it an 8.
An 8.
I'm gonna give it an 8. I really did like it. It's the female characters in this, I think. If there had been more, I would have given it.
That's okay. I mean, 8's a good
it's pretty
score
good.
still.
Yeah, it's really up there.
So, together, out of Staplers... Yeah! 9 Staplers out of 10.
9 out of 10 Staplers for the movie...
Office Space.
Office Space.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangsta.
Okay. 9 out of 10 Staplers for the movie. 4 out of 5 for the
Cotton
snack.
candy.
But I have to say, I might bump it down to a 3.5 because I have a coating of it still on my tongue, and we've been doing this for over an hour and a half.
That's what happens when you eat insulation.
Yeah. But 4 out of 5 for the snack. And what we have coming up, we're in the middle of our cycle right now. So we just did Scooby-Doo, and now we are coming into our back to school specials.
Reading Rainbow.
We're going to do Reading Rainbow for our live action TV show. And we don't have What Is Steve Willing to Watch, because there aren't too many episodes of the original from the 80s that we can find. After that, instead of a movie, we're going to do after school specials. And I'm so excited. Steve, I'm so excited. You have no idea. I have been waiting for this since we started this podcast. I found them in February and I was like, I'm going to wait until September. So this has been a slow burn, Steve. I'm
You're
so excited.
And I'm excited to get past it.
Yeah. It'll be great or horrible, depending. And then for our next cartoon, again, a little school-themed show, and that is The Magic School Bus. So those are our 3 next shows, and that's what's coming up. Yeah. Other than that, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.